Welcome to the What to Next podcast. So excited to have you back. And today we'll talk about classics that are perfect epic love stories. We have our special guest, Victoria, talking about epic love stories that are featured in classics books. So we got Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, and other books that you should definitely add on to your list. If you haven't listed, you want to read a classic this year, I think this is the perfect introduction for romance readers if they wanted to do it. We got a little toxic relationship, we got something like Sweeney, and we got the ultimate love letter to Mean Zen. This episode was originally aired as a middle hour episode where we talk about book recommendations every week on YouTube every Thursday at 12 o'clock. And on every other Monday, we talk about book gossip or book news. So it's a fun, chatty episode. If you want to get more recommendations, I encourage you to sign up to the Substack. So you can share you can join my Substack, but also you'll be recommended Victoria's Bigelow Lifestyle and Francesca under the cover. So there's a little bit of everything if you're looking for new book recommendations. Now let's get to the episode.
I'm going to be sharing some classic love stories. These are love stories I just kind of feel like everyone needs to read at a certain point. I do have a video separately on the channel where I talk about toxic love stories, okay? Because not all love stories are happy and butterflies and rainbows and super positive. But when it comes to epic love stories, I think, and classics, by the way, I think I have to start with Pride and Prejudice. You have to. I kind of think it's required. You know, Elizabeth Bennet, Mr. Darcy, they're just literary icons. Their romance is legendary. But also, I want us to be realistic and just face facts that this love story almost didn't happen, right? Elizabeth or heroine is just very sharp-witted. I love that about her, fiercely independent, and she's about to fall in love or get in a relationship with this really snobbish kind of guy. Mr. Darcy, on the other hand, is, just opposite, very cold, aloof, and just very, and let's be real, he's rude. I think he's rude. Okay. But I think that's also where the magic of this love story begins, the fact that they're completely opposite. And also just realizing that sometimes the person that challenges you the most might just be someone who can understand you the best. We see Elizabeth misjudging Darcy, but Darcy also misjudges Elizabeth. So this is more of a slow burn relationship, okay? Using the modern terms. Slow burn, full of misunderstandings. And of course, like the title suggests, pride really getting in the way. But I think when we boil it down and we see Darcy kind of coming off of his high horse, really humbling himself, and Elizabeth letting go of her, again, going back to the title, Prejudices, we see a romance that's actually built on mutual respect, admiration, and of course, love. So if you want a classic that is banter filled, tension, but will just leave you with a full heart at the end, again, you have to read Pride and Prejudice. If you haven't already, I do think it's one of those books you should definitely read. All right. Continuing in the classic canon, of course, another book I think you should read is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This one isn't just a love story. I actually feel it's more about self worth and independence and choosing a love that really doesn't what's that word, belittle you and diminish you. So we have our main character, Jane. She's had a really hard life, just really horrible, lots of neglect, cruelty, and, she's lonely. And she knows that growing up, if she's going to survive in this world, she has to rely on herself. Hence, just being super independent. Now, she meets Mr. Rochester. He is mysterious and full of secrets and all the things. And look, there is a problem, right? And this is a bit toxic because that's the thing with classic love stories. They're not always straightforward. And if you want to say it's a happily ever after, fine. But he's toxic, man, right? He's already married. And, what do they call it? The elephant in the room. That's the analogy I was trying to find. The elephant in the room is that his wife, right? Because remember, I was saying his wife was literally locked in the attic. Now, she does something. I don't want to spoil it for you all, but she does something. It ends up in a death. And of course, at the end, Jane has a choice. And of course, she decides to get together with Mr. Rochester. I highly debate this one. I said this was a toxic love story, and my sister is constantly debating me and saying, no, their relationship is one of mutual respect as well and devotion and stuff like that. I don't know. This one is up for debate. I really would love to hear your opinion. So again, let me know your thoughts in the comments. But again, I said what I said. I think to some degree it's very toxic. But anyway, it's an epic love story. The next epic love story I wanted to share with you all is what I consider to be the OG rom-com. And the OG rom-com for me is Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare. So I know we tend to focus on Shakespeare writing lots of tragic love stories. And look, the reality is he has written just that's all, lots of tragedy. However, I do think this is the OG rom-com. We meet Beatrice and Benedict, and I think they are the OG rom-com couple. Beatrice is very sharp tongued, she's not going to be tied down by a man. But Benedict is also equally witty, but he's also stubborn. And he's swearing off being married at all. So it's really interesting seeing what happens when two people who claim to hate each other keep finding themselves drawn together. Sorry. So in a way, I kind of feel like this is another OG enemies to lovers romance as well, because we see their friends having to trick them into realizing, hey, you're actually in love. That's really what this is. So there's lots of banter in this one, lots of misunderstandings, lots of drama, tension, and all that. But I think, again, I love the enemies to lovers element, but we also see lots of just partnership and growing respect for each other, and that they're not going to change themselves for each other. They just admit that, hey, us being different can actually make life more fun and interesting and playful. So, anyway, this one is very playful. I think, this is one of those Shakespeare works that does give you light and playful to some degree. We do get that happy ending. And again, OG rom-com, OG enemies to lovers is Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare. Okay. Then I'm going back to Jane Austen because, yeah, Jane Austen is essentially the mum of romance. The one book I don't talk about often enough because I think I talk a lot about Emma because I do love Emma. I also love Northanger Abbey, but I want to throw Persuasion into the mix because I feel that some love stories aren't about falling in love for the first time. They're about finding your way back to the one that got away. Right. So that's kind of essentially the theme in this one, the one that got away. So we meet Anne in this one and Captain Wentworth. They were young, they were in love and ready to spend their lives together. But Anne was persuaded to turn him down, because he wasn't wealthy enough. He wasn't, what do you call it, successful, have the right social standing and status kind of thing. And she was just convinced that, hey, she had to be really practical about who she's going to marry. So, anyway, fast forward to I don't remember how many years later. I'm just going on a limb and say maybe 8 to 10. He's now successful, Wentworth, very successful, very confident. And he's actually very much not over Anne. Now, Anne is filled with lots of regret, and she's realizing that, hey, you know what? She never really stopped loving the guy. But this isn't a story, because I know some classics tend to be this way. This isn't a story about just wallowing in the past. It really is about second chances. So, yeah, essentially, it's proving that, you know what? Maybe time changes things, and time sometimes makes things better. And in this one, I have to say, one of the things that stands out very much in Persuasion to me is I'm just going to call it the letter. Because if you've read this book and you've read the letter, you know what Wentworth's declaration of love, I feel, is a really grand gesture. It's just one of the most romantic moments I feel in classic literature anyway. So if you want something, like second chances and people coming back together, I think this is one of the ultimate second chance romances. Okay. And the last book I'm going to share with you is a personal favorite. It's a comfort read of mine. I do revisit this one more often than I think most of the books I've shared so far. Is actually A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. Now, I love the setting in this one. So let me just first say that I think the armchair traveling is wonderful. And I love just kind of being drawn back to this one. But as it relates to the love story, I'm going to say this one focuses on love isn't just about who you fall in love with. If that makes sense, it's more about if you are brave enough to step outside your comfort zone, step outside of society's standards, and be brave enough to actually choose the person you love. Because it's one thing to love a person, but not act on it. So, anyways, in this one, we meet our main character, Lucy. Love Lucy dearly. Lucy is young, she's very well mannered, and she's engaged to a man who makes sense by societal standards and, on paper. He checks the boxes of all the things. But then she meets this man called George. Now, George is a more free spirited kind of person, and George challenges everything she knows about life, herself, and even, what is expected of her as a woman. So, just everything she's ever been told about how a woman should live and what she should do, he challenges that. However, she gets really afraid. She's really afraid of what will people say. First off, if she calls off her engagement, but more importantly, goes off with a man like George. I don't want to spoil it by getting too much into George, but trust me, there is stuff about George. Now, she tries to deny her feelings and she's trying to focus on the fact that, hey, being secure in a marriage is more important. And, instead of just following her feelings. But of course, it doesn't go away, even though she tries to ignore it. And then finally, she lets herself just say, hey, I'm going to choose the life that makes me happy and feel more alive and just, breaking free from all expectations. So, anyway, this one is about choosing your happiness and your joy over what society says and, what your family and everyone else has an opinion on. And your duty to your family, because that also comes up as well. And it's just really beautiful. So those are my classic books that I feel like you should visit at least once in your lifetime as it relates to love stories. If you're looking for love stories, I think these are top of the list. I would love to hear what you'll think. So let me know in the comments if you're watching live. Let me know if you felt some of these were toxic, like the one I said. My sister and I were debating very recently because she watched my toxic couples. It's just like, it's toxic. Yes, it is. So I'm like, listen, man, that is toxic as hell. The elephant in the room is the man's wife locked up in the room. But I'd love to hear what are some of your favorite classic love stories as well. Of course, we have to shout out Erin before I even ask Fran and Laura as well. Also, thank you. Yes, it was a big win to have all the books fit on the shelves, even though, like I said, my husband just chopped them on there, but we will sort them out eventually. You love that cover of Pride and Prejudice. Yes, it's actually my favorite. I sought out that cover to share with you all today. I gifted myself that edition this past Christmas. But I also love the fact that you are mentioning that you used to teach that novel as well. I think I know that plain and gray one you're also talking about. Thank you for co-signing Mr. Rochester. Okay. But I do agree. We would take him over Heathcliff. Much Ado is definitely, in my opinion, the OG rom-com. It's just so funny, so funny, so funny. And oh my gosh, that letter. Yes, everyone, if you want an epic love story letter, you have to go and read Persuasion. You have to. I feel there is no other declaration. There is none in classic literature. I feel that measure up. If you feel there is a letter out there that measures up, I mean, do tell, because I can't think of anything else. So, my opinion. And clearly, Erin agrees with me too. So, see, I have company. Come for us. Come for us. What did y'all think, though?
I have to co-sign your toxic relationship though with Jane Eyre. I actually have never heard somebody question, but your sister's take is interesting.
Yeah. Like, what? I said, look, I'll include it because it's toxic. So, and look, here's a reality. Not all relationships are straightforward. We have some toxic people walking around in these streets. Yeah. No. So it's worth the mention. Yeah.
And they're just a suffering. Just to have a toxic relationship is with the suffering as a healthy, low angsty rom-com. That
Yeah.
for like we have equal opportunity. We live in the truth.
We do.
Life is not black or white.
Life is not black and white. Don't ask me to pick a side because I'm going to justify some other stuff. And then I'm like, wait, I see it over, I see that side, but I see that side too.
Yeah.
But anyways, if you are just joining us, welcome. We are talking about some epic love stories in literature. I just shared my 5, they're classics.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Watch Read Next podcast. If you enjoy our bookish conversations and want more recommendations, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, head on over to the Watch Read Next blog for a list of books mentioned in today's show. Happy reading.